Hey guys, Ryan here with Night and Day Marine with another Marine Training Academy video. This video is going to be part 2 of the Elite FS Basics training course. In the last video, we left off showing you how to add and change the custom split screens over here on the right hand side of the screen. So we'll continue on from there. So going on to the left side of the screen here, we have another list of menu options. If you scroll up through here, you can see how you have extra additional options down here at the bottom. Now starting up here at the top, you can see where we have this little waypoints button. Now if we click on this, what it's going to do is it's going to take us to our waypoints, routes, and trails screen. From the screen, we can go through, we can look at all of the waypoints we have saved. We can go through, we can edit, we can delete them, we can go through and we can basically just do all the changes that we could ever want to make to our waypoints, routes, or trails from the screen specifically. Now if you click here at the top, you can see where we can click on routes. So where we could go in, if we had routes saved on here, we could go through and again, edit, change, and delete those. And the same thing with the trails. If we click on the trails, we can go in, we can view trails, we can actually start a new trail, and we can go through and we can set up the settings for them as far as the logging type. Now, in these, I always recommend actually running it on the auto logging type. Now you can set it for distance or time, but in my opinion, doing so, it kind of causes larger gaps and smaller points in time to where how it logs it, because it sets little individual points on the screen to draw the trail. And if you go with the distance or time period, sometimes it spreads those out a little bit too far, and so it becomes a little jagged, not quite as smooth. So I recommend running it on the auto and just leaving it there. Now let's go ahead and let's go back. Now on the left here, we have other options where we have like our alarms, vessels, info. I'm not going to cover all of these things in this basics video right now, but a few of these that I do want to touch on is the info. If we go to that, you'll see where we can, if you're within 50 miles of a tide station, it'll show up on the screen here. I'm kind of landlocked in the middle of the United States, so I don't have any tides around me, so it's not going to show up for me. But if you're along the coastline, usually the different tide stations will show up, like I said, if they are within 50 miles of your location. Now you can also go into your trip calculator up here at the top, which allows you to be able to just see information as far as how far you've traveled, your average speed, maximum speed, and you can do it for just the day, or you can set specific trips. And the last one here is the sun and moon calculator. This one's pretty neat. It shows you what all of the sunrise, sunset, and the moonrise, moonset. And you can also go in right here on the date, and you can go and choose a future date on there, and it's going to show you the exact times for those. Lowrance has gone through and calculated and configured what all of those sunrises and sunsets are going to be for a very long point in time in the future. So you can go in there and you can actually go in and, so let's say if we want to know what it is on a different date, we can select it, and now it's going to show us what it is for that date specifically. Now let's go ahead, let's go back out of here. And now the other option I really want to show you here is our storage menu option. Now this one's actually pretty important. You will most likely use this one fairly often. And as you can see, there are some different options on here. Again, the one at the waypoints right here. Now this is actually a different waypoints option. When we select on it, this is actually how we can export and import waypoints to our display or to an SD card. So as you can see right here where we have like options for export, export region, we can delete all the waypoints, or we can actually purge all of our deleted files. Now before we get into that, I'm going to touch base on some of these other options and we'll come back to it. Now up here we can see where we have our sonar logs. If we select that, that allows us to be able to view the sonar logs we have, or if we click on them, we can go in and we can view it. As I said before, we can convert it, which basically just transfers the file from one to another. So if we convert, we can actually transfer it from, let's say if we want to save to the internal memory, or we can go in, we can change it to the memory card to where we want to save it. And all that does is it just transfers the file, like I said, from either the unit to the card or a card to the unit. Now we can also copy it, which just makes a copy of it. We can rename or we can delete it. Now the last one at the top here is going to be our transfers. Now I mentioned this before in one of my other videos on how to do the software updates, but when you click on the transfers, what that gives us is a list of any type of transfers that we're making through like the Wi-Fi on the unit. So if you're downloading a software update, or you're downloading a sonar log file, or maybe like a Genesis map or something like that, you can come in here and you can view what the progress of it is. And if for some reason, let's say you go to download a file, it kind of gets locked up and it doesn't finish downloading, and you try to download it again a second time and it won't let you, make sure you come in here and remove the file because it may be sitting at a certain percentage and not traveling any further than that. So you can go in, you can delete it, and then that way you can restart the transfer again or restart the download to get it to start working again. So let's go ahead and go back. Now, on the bottom here, you're going to see these options. Now, where it says memory card right here, this will only pop up if you have an actual SD card inserted into your unit. Otherwise, that will not show up on the screen. But as you can see, if you click on the little box on the left here, it'll drop down and it's going to give us everything that is all stored on our memory card. Right now, as you can see, it shows my settings.set and my waypoints file. That's a settings file and a waypoint file, which I'll show you how to create here in just a minute. Now, one thing I do want to point out on the memory card is when you do the drop down, if you ever see anything like that says DCIM, that means that that card is formatted to work on a camera or a phone, which also means that the file is not going to work correctly on your unit. So you'll need to take that card out, put it in your computer, and reformat it to a FAT32 type format. Now, I'm not going to show you how to do that right now. If you guys really want to, leave a comment down below and let me know that you want to see a video on how to do that. But for now, we'll go ahead and skip over that. Now, if we scroll up here on the left, we can go into My Files. Now, when we drop that down, we can see how we have like our cookies, which are just kind of saved files on there, kind of letting us know where we've been and what we've done. We can pull up our logs, like our sonar logs, weather logs, any type of log that we've recorded on here. You have your manuals. So actually on here, so if you're out on the boat and you forget your paper manual with you, you can always come in here and actually open up your manual. And this is the full Elite FS operations manual built into the unit. Now, I'm not going to go into it because it is kind of slow and it does take a while to switch between pages and screens with it. So I'm not going to go into it at the moment, but I recommend going and playing with it and kind of getting a feel of how you can use that while you're out on the water. Now, the same thing goes down here as before where we have our transfers. Those are just transfers that we have transferred on the unit. You have different updates, which would be like your update files. And then you also have your wallpaper. Now, what's cool about these units is that you can take any picture that you have and load it in here and use it as a wallpaper background. So let's say you took pictures of your family, a big fish that you caught, whatever the case, you can actually go in here and save it from your card onto your display here. And if you go in, you'll click on one. As you can see, it shows a little sample image right here of what it'll be. Now, if we set as wallpaper, and then we go back, now you can see that that image is set as the background wallpaper on our page's screen. Let's go ahead and go back into storage here. And that's going to be it as far as my files. And now the last one here is our settings database. Now what this will allow us to do is to back up a copy of all of the settings that we have set up on our display. So let's say, for example, that you need to do like a soft or hard reset on your unit. And when you do that, it's going to delete all of the settings that you've programmed into there. So what you can do is you can actually click right here on settings database, and we can select a destination folder to save to, in which I recommend going onto my memory card, because if you save it to the unit and then you run a reset, chances are it's probably going to delete it. So I recommend saving it to your memory card. You don't need to drop down or anything, just select the main file where it says memory card, and we hit OK. And now, because I already had a settings file saved onto there, it's going to give me the option to either create a new one or to save it over the top of my old one. So now you can see where the export is completed. And now when we go back up into our memory card, we now have this settings.set file right there. So what you can do is you can just simply click on it, and now you can import that file right back into your unit, and that'll reload all of your settings that you set up and saved on there right back into the display. So that way you don't have to go back in and reset all that up again. All right, so the last thing we're going to touch on here, like I mentioned before, was the waypoints. So when we click on that, now we have these options again where we can export region, delete all, and purge. Now I want to touch base on what the purge function does. A lot of people have asked me about this. Now the purge does have a very important function. So when you delete a waypoint, a route, or a trail, it kind of leaves like a little bit of a logged file on that in the display here. Now it's very, very small. It doesn't take up any room when you do that. But the whole point of it is, so let's say we have two units networked together, and one of the units is off and the other unit is on. So if we go in and we delete a bunch of waypoint files on this display here while our other unit is off, the way it's set up is that when we go and turn that other unit back on, all of those waypoints that we deleted on this display are going to also delete on the other networked unit that we have connected to it. But if we go in here and we delete the waypoints, routes, and trails, and we hit this purge button, what'll happen is that this unit will remove any remembrance or memory that those files were there. And so that when we turn on the other display, all of those waypoints will transfer back to this unit. So that way they match up and all the waypoints are equal between the two units. So that's the whole point of the purge. So it's a nice little neat feature that they added in there. Kind of allows you a way to be able to prevent yourself from losing all of your waypoints on both units. And now over here where we can see where we can export. Now this is going to give us an option to export all of the waypoints, routes, and trails we have saved on this unit to an SD card. So if we click export, you're going to see where you have this user data file version 6. Now if you click on this, you're going to see where you have all these other versions on here. Now it's important to know that if you're going to just back up this file to maybe be able to reload back into this unit or maybe another newer unit, you always want to choose the highest version file number there, like version 6. What that does is it takes all the information that's saved to those files. So, whenever you save a waypoint, it saves information like the depth, the water temperature, its location, the file name, the little icon, any notes you put in there. So all of that information will transfer with it when you save that file. Now, the lower the number you go on here, the less information it's going to transfer with it. However, the importance of this is that if you're going to save this waypoint file to a card and then try to transfer it to an older display. So let's say you have like an old LMS 520 or you have like an old HDS Gen 1 or Gen 2. Those units, the software is not set up to be able to read this higher version file. So you'd have to go down and select a lower number. So if you're going to use like an HDS, you would use the file version 4. Or if you're going to use something older like an LMS 520, you'd want to use version 2 because that's the highest software version that that unit can actually accept. Now the very last one down here is the GPS or the GPX. Now that is also important. Now that is a very bare bones raw file that it'll save. Essentially it's only going to save the location of the waypoint and the file name, and that's it. But that's important because if you have for some reason a glitched file in here, so you're trying to export out of a waypoint, put it into another unit, and it just won't load, and it's giving you all kinds of problems, it's usually because you have a corrupted file in one of your waypoints or one of your trails. So if you go down here and you export it out as this GPX file, it's going to remove that kind of glitch and that corrupted file and allow you to be able to transfer those waypoints back out of it onto another display and not have to worry about having that little glitch and preventing it from loading up. So let's go ahead and click there on 6. So now it jumps to the next screen where we can choose where we want to save it to. So we can choose, like say, to memory card. We hit OK. Now again, because I already had a waypoint file saved on here, it gives me the option to either create a new one or to overwrite over the existing one. Now in this case, let's just do the new. So it pops up. It now gives us an option to name that file, and we can hit enter. And now it has saved it. So if we exit back out of here, we can now see where we saved that waypoints, routes, trails, number 2 USR file to our memory card. Now, if we go back in here, now you have this other cool option here where we can export by region. Now, if we select that, what it's going to do is it's going to take us back to our map. And you see how you have this little box with the X's on it? What we can do is we can expand on the screen here, and then we just move it over the top of whatever lake we want. And then when we export, it's only going to export the waypoints that are within inside this little box. So say you have a friend that's asking for some waypoints on one particular body of water, but you don't want to give them everything that you have, you can actually just export just this individual area right here and then send it over to them. So it's a nice little feature that it gives you to do this. Let's go ahead and cancel and go back. Now that's really about it for the storage options. As I mentioned before, you can scroll up here and you have a couple more options down below, like for a phone or for the store. Now this neat one here for the phone, if we click on it, what that does is it uses Bluetooth to be able to connect to your phone. So, when you're out on the water, you don't usually have your phone sitting there right next to you. Usually you have maybe put it in a little stow compartment or something so it doesn't get wet. Well, if you're doing that, you can link this. That way, if you get a phone call or a text message, it'll display right here on your screen. So that way you don't miss an important call from somebody while you're out there on the water. Let's go ahead and go back. And the last one is the store. Now the store, you can go in, if you already have an account with like the Go Free Shop or the Genesis Maps website, you can actually just sign in right here. But if you don't, you can create a new login, and that allows you to be able to go in and be able to download like social maps from the Genesis Maps website, or even be able to purchase and download new CMap files onto your display. Let's go ahead and exit out of there. Now let's go into our internal settings. See this little gear up here on the top left-hand corner? We're going to click on it, and that's going to take us into all of our internal settings that we have here on the display. Now I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I will touch base on several that I feel are important. So the first option here is our system. So on here you can see we've got a lot of different options. We can kind of scroll up and down here on the right. Now the first one here is my key beeps. Now I find it really annoying for this unit to beep every single time I touch the screen. So one of the first things I usually do is I come in here and I turn my key beeps off. So that way it doesn't go beep, beep, beep every time I touch the screen. Now also you have your time. So if we click on this, if we tap right here at the top, we can pull up the option to be able to change the time on here. Now it only changes in 15-minute increments. So as you notice, let's say if I press the button down here, see how it changes? Those are 15-minute increments. Now, anytime the time is off on your display, it should always only be off by what would be considered a 15-minute increment. If it is off by more than that, like say it's off by 7 minutes or 12 minutes, some sort of odd amount, you are not going to be able to go in and change it to that exact time. But in all reality, it should never do that. So let's go ahead and click off, and now we can save that. Now, as we scroll up here, now I mentioned before in part 1 of the training course here, when you push this button right here on the bottom right, that's going to bring up our quick access keys. Now, if we can do like a quick press or long press to be able to activate specific options that we set up on it. Now, originally when I showed you in that video, when we first clicked on it, it gave us the option to go in and set what we want for a short or long press. However, once you have that set, you can't go back into it and adjust that by just simply pressing this button. You have to come into here and select the quick access keys. And now we can go in and we can select something else as far as a different option to use for that short or long press for the quick access button. Let's go ahead and save here. Now you can also access your satellites. So this screen here shows us how many GPS satellites we're picking up at any given point in time. So if you're not getting a good GPS signal, you can come in here and take a look and see if you're getting, if there's many satellites in the area or if it's just not working at all. You can go back out here. Now you have your restore defaults. Restore defaults is just like doing a soft reset where you hold down your pages and power button when you're turning it on. It doesn't delete any waypoints, routes, or trails. It just basically resets your settings and resets the unit. So if it's kind of glitching or having any kind of minor issues, it will usually generally take care of that. Now we also have down here is our advanced menu. Now this menu is pretty neat. This allows us to be able to control the different features as far as what we're going to see on the display. So if we go in here, so as far as like waypoints, allows us to be able to control whether we allow duplicate waypoints. User interface, this is where you can go in and you can turn off the auto hide menu. It's where you have your menu on the right hand side of the screen when you're on your chart or your sonar page. After 15 seconds, it will automatically slide off the screen to give you the full amount of viewable area. And that's if you turn it on right here. Or if you don't want to do that, you can always just touch on the screen and swipe your finger to the right to slide that same menu off the screen. Now, the other big one here is features. This one allows us to be able to turn on or off all the different features on our display. So if for some reason you don't want to see your sonar or your structure scan screen or really anything else when you press your pages button, you can activate that here right from this menu. Let's see, this unit can do a lot of additional things that maybe you don't have. So for example, maybe you don't have 3D sonar or active target. If that for some reason is showing up when you press your pages screen, you can go in here and deactivate that to just kind of reduce down the clutter. Now also, one other thing I'll point out is the audio server and the autopilot. A lot of times on the left side of the screen, you're going to get little menu bars over here when you first turn this unit on. If you're not going to use those, so if you don't have like a Sirius satellite radio connected to it, or you don't have an autopilot on there, you can go in and you can turn that off there, so that way it'll remove those bars off the left side of your screen. Now let's go ahead, let's go back. And now the last one on the system menu is going to be our About page. Now this screen right here is actually very important because it can give you some very vital information. For example, here on the top left-hand corner, it's going to show us our version application. Now that's going to be our software version application numbers. So you can go in here and you can view and see what version your unit's currently running, and then match that up to what it shows on the website to make sure you have the latest software update always available. However, if you do have your unit connected to Wi-Fi, if there is a new software update that is available for it, it will automatically show up on the screen and tell you that there's an update that needs to be performed. Now you also see right here where it says your serial number and barcode. Those numbers are important because those are the numbers that you're going to give to Lowrance if you ever have to call them because you're having issues with your unit or you need to return it with a warranty. Any case like that where you need to call them, the first thing they're ever going to ask you is what your serial number or barcode number is. So make sure you have that handy anytime you're going to call them. Now there are some other options over here where like we can go into our support. Here we can actually create reports to be able to send to Lowrance. So if you are having issues, they may ask you to send them a report, which will basically just kind of log everything that you've done with the unit and show what software it has, what components you have connected to it. So they can go in and kind of diagnose maybe what the issue is that you're having. Now let's go ahead and go back. Now again over here, we have some more options here. I'm not going to really go over the features, service. Navigation just kind of gives us the options as far as setting our cross-track error or our arrival radius alarms for it. So when you're navigating to one point on the map, so let's say you said to go to a certain spot, whenever you start to arrive there, it'll set off an alarm for whatever distance you've set right here. Now let's go into our chart options. Now there's a lot of neat features you can activate or turn on and off here. So you can turn on like range rings, you can turn on different extensions. Now, one big important thing I want to point out here is where it says waypoints, routes, and trails here, and it shows that they're on. If you were to turn them off here, that means that it completely removes them from this GPS screen or your map screen. So if you're ever out on the water and you're just not seeing your waypoints, your trail just isn't showing up for whatever the reason, so make sure you come in here and check to see if this is set to on or off. Because if it's set to off, which, I don't know why it does it, but it seems like very often the trail seems to get switched off. And so you're not going to see it. So if you come in here, switch that on. Now you can also go into your waypoints, routes, and trails down here, which is kind of a redundant option. It just takes us right back into the screen I showed you before when we first pressed our pages button here. Now let's go into our sonar. Now I could make an entire video on how to use all these features on here. And in fact, I did. I made an internal sonar video for the HDS carbon and live displays. So the menu options for this are basically exactly the same as the menu options on that HDS. So if you want to go more in depth and understand all the little aspects on the screen, I do recommend going in and watching that video because it will directly apply to this display. But for now, I'll just point out here we have our internal sonar where we can turn on or off the sonar that's processing in our unit. And a lot of this is really designed for when you have this unit Ethernetted or networked to another display. So here where it says network sonar, when we have this on and we have this display networked to another unit, when you're on your sonar screen, it's going to give you a menu option to go in and choose where you want to pull the source from. To where if you want to see the sonar from this display, or if you want to view the sonar from any other display that's networked to it. You can just quickly go in, switch it to whatever display you want to view, and it'll appear right here on your screen. Now your network sonar mode, this just applies to if you have multiple units connected together. So if you do have units Ethernetted, you want a multi-source, or if you're just running the unit by itself, you'll set it to single source. And now, one more thing I want to point out here is our installation. Now, when we go into this, the important one is down here at the very bottom is the transducer type. Now, the transducers that come with this unit generally will have the XID transducer identification software built into them. So as soon as you connect the transducer to the display, right here it should automatically populate and show what transducer is connected to it and will gray it out so you can't go in and change it and switch it to something else because it knows exactly which transducer is already connected to. However, if you have a transducer connected to it and it doesn't auto-populate, we can simply go into here and now we can go through this long list and choose the exact transducer that you're operating. Now keep in mind that the active imaging 3-in-1 transducer that this unit normally comes with is at the very bottom down here listed as AI 3-in-1. All right, and so now going further down, we have options. So if you have an autopilot connected to it, you can control those options through here. If you have like a NEMA 2000 network with like a fuel level or fuel flow sensors, we can go in and you can set up the vessel for it, or you can refill your tank to be able to view the correct levels of gas that's in here. We can go in here with our alarms, and this is where we can actually go in into the settings, and we can set up each individual alarm that we want to have on the screen. And we can also go in and adjust the specific parameters for each alarm. Now you can also click history at the top and view any alarms that have previously gone off. Or if your unit's just beeping all the time and you can't figure out what it is, you can go in here to active and view what the current alarm is that's triggering at that point in time. Now we have our units, which is just all of our units of measurement. Now let's go in here to wireless. This one's an important one. This is where we can go in and we can control our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth networks. Now starting at the top here, it really has kind of condensed it down to where you don't have to mess with this down here at the bottom too much if you just use these two at the top. So the unit has two Wi-Fi options on it. It has the ability to be able to connect to your home Wi-Fi to be able to download like software updates, mapping, or it has the ability to broadcast its own wireless signal outwards to connect to your phone and tablet. So that way you can share information from your phone, like say from the Lowrance app or whatever other app you're using, back and forth between the display and your phone. However, keep in mind when you're doing that, it's not really internet access. So chances are on your phone, it's going to say, connected, no internet. And that's just because it's just simply sending out a wireless connection signal between the display and your phone. Now you can also go in here, and this is where you can turn on or off your Bluetooth or go in and control the Bluetooth options for it. Now here, the built-in Wi-Fi, this is where if you have this one activated, this sets it up to where you can connect to your home Wi-Fi network. And then when you want to connect to it, you have that on, you click into your Wi-Fi networks here, and this is going to give you the options where you can go through, you can select your own home personal Wi-Fi, and then you can connect to it, like again, to be able to download software updates, maps, different things of that nature. Or if we go into the built-in hotspot, that's where we can activate it to be able to connect to our phone or your tablet. And then you see down here where it has this Elite FS7 number. That's the number that's actually going to show up on your phone when you go to connect to the Wi-Fi, so you know where to connect to. We have two more that I'm going to cover, which is the network and the simulator. The network here is going to primarily be designed for anytime you have a NEMA 2000 network connected to your display. Now there are a few things with the Ethernet that will show up on here as well, but it's primarily for that NMEA 2000 network. So if you go in here, so let's say you have the network connected, but you're maybe not seeing something, you can go in and you can click your auto configure, and the unit's going to go through and it's going to search all of its ports looking for anything that's connected to it. And if it's connected to it, it's going to bring it up on here and display it. And if it's not connected, it's just going to remove all of those sources and extra information that's on the screen that maybe you're not using. And we can also go into our data sources. Data sources is where we can go through and we can manually select where we want data to come from. So for example, when I click on my GPS, you can see where it drops down here and it shows my internal GPS antenna that's built in here. Well, let's say I have a 0.1 antenna connected through my NEMA 2000 network. That would then show up at the bottom down here, and I can go through and I can select which one I want to pull from. Now, like I mentioned before, this primarily applies to the NEMA 2000 network and also generally applies to your overlay data. So like up in the top left-hand corner where you have your, your speed, your distance, your time, your voltage, whatever the case it is, going in here and selecting these sources is going to tell the unit where to pull that information from. So let's say, for example, we go into Vessel here. This is where we can go in, we can choose where we may want to pull our fuel economy, our fuel rate, if we have those types of sensors connected to it. We can go into our sonar. This is where we can tell to make sure that it is picking up, a sonar source. We can tell it to, if I had another unit network to this display here, you would see that other unit listed there. And if I selected it, when it showed the depth up there in the top left-hand corner on the overlay, it'll show the depth for that display instead of this one. So there's a lot of different uses for the data source selection. I could go way more in depth on that, but I'm just going to briefly touch on it here. So let's go ahead and go back. Now another important option here is our device list. Now what this is going to show, it's going to list every single NMEA 2000 device connected to it. It's going to list it out in nice, neat order. Now keep in mind, you're going to get 5 options for this display and for any other display for that matter. If for whatever reason, it'll always show itself 5 times on the screen here. And then if I had a 0.1 antenna, an EP60 or an EP65 fuel level sensor connected, it would then show up in the list at the bottom. And I can go in and click on it, and that way I can view the certain software that it's running and even be able to run software updates to that NEMA 2000 device. Now let's go ahead and go back here. Now we have our diagnostics. Now this is really the last one I want to touch on. And the only main important one here is our bus state. Now you can see where it says bus off, and that's because I do not have an NMEA 2000 network connected to it at this point in time. And now even if I have it there, the only way that the bus is going to turn on is if it detects 12 volts coming in through that NMEA 2000 network. So if you have a network connected to it, the different sensors aren't showing up here on your display, you go into your device list, you don't see them. Good thing is to come in here and check your bus state. If it says off, that means you're not getting power to your NEMA 2000 network, and it means that your unit is not going to detect that network being there, and none of those sensors are going to operate. So you'll need to go through, troubleshoot that network, and see where the power is stopping at, whether it's through a T connector, or maybe even the power source where it's connected to has come undone. Let's go ahead, let's go back there. And you can go in, so if you had a Sirius satellite antenna, we can go in and we can control the Sirius options there. We can go into like our NEMA 2000 and control specific things. So if we had 2 units networked with NEMA 2000, I could tell it whether or not I wanted to receive or send waypoints, sync the backlight. Or if you had the really, really old NMEA 0183 bare wire connection networked, you can go in and you can control the different types of output sentences that it does, so that way it can communicate and talk to the other devices you have connected. Now, the very last option down here on the left is going to be our simulator. Now, this one's important because when you're at home or maybe you're following along with my videos, you can go in and you can turn your simulator on right here. And that way, when you go back to your sonar screen, your map screen, it's going to show you a simulated file. So let's see if I press my Pages button here. I go into my sonar. And now we can see how it's scrolling across, showing a sonar image, even though I'm not on the water at this particular point in time. It kind of allows you to go in, set up all of your menu options, kind of customize it however you want before actually having to go out on the water. Let's go ahead and go back here. Now, another important aspect to our simulator is the files. Now, you may go in here, turn on your simulator, and then you go back to your sonar and see that nothing's showing up on the screen. Well, that's because you have to go into your files and you have to actually physically manually select the individual preloaded files on the display here for your simulator. So if we go into sonar, when you first turn the unit on, most likely it's going to say none. So you got to go in here and select a specific simulation file. Now, as you can see, there's all these different simulation options here for active target, live sight forward. Now on these, let's say you want to view the live sight down. As you can see, it gives us a bunch of different options, but not all of these are going to work. So what you'll have to do is see the LSD, that means live sight down. So that's the simulator file for that menu option specifically. And that same thing applies to the rest of the options here on the screen. And then when we're done, we can go ahead and hit save, and we've got our simulation file running the way we want. Now, one last thing I want to point out is never, never, never turn on your retail mode. That menu option there is specifically for retailers and dealers that have their units out on display. If you ever turn on that retail mode, it's going to kind of act like a simulator, but then it's also going to kind of pop up advertisements and different things on the screen. And the worst part about it is that if you go in and you adjust your menu options and settings, it's going to automatically reset those every few minutes. And so you're going to lose everything that you put in there. Plus, it's really hard to get the unit back out of retail mode once it's in. So stay away from turning on the retail mode. But I guess that's going to be about it for the Elite FS Basics #2 training video here. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Make sure to subscribe and like the video if you do. And as always, stay safe out there, guys.